Hello, everyone. Welcome to this time around with Guildmaster Gaming. This time we've got a little bit different than what we've been doing. We have, well, I want to say a multi-talented creative talent in Bryan Young. We are here to discuss his most recent BattleTech book, his fourth one in what he's been doing with them, VOIDBREAKER. But Bryan is known for other novels, short stories, work with Star Wars, work on Robotech, as a film director, screenplay writer, and probably a multitude of other things that we just don't hear about. So, Bryan, please give us an introduction about yourself real quick and about your book, VOIDBREAKER.
Well, Dan, thanks for having me. And yeah, just multi-hyphenate. I do a lot of stuff across the board. Really love dabbling in all kinds of media, doing stuff in board games and tabletop games and fiction of all kinds in a bunch of different genres and screenwriting and filmmaking and have done documentary filmmaking and as you're aware, working on a festival tour with a short film right now, and just really love storytelling in all of its forms and working on comic books, which is a lot of fun. Actually, I just turned in Michael A. Stackpole, the New York Times bestselling writer. He and I collaborated on the first volume of a BattleTech graphic novel that we just turned the script in for. So, doing a lot of stuff that way, just across the board. As far as BattleTech, Void Breaker is a novel that is really interesting in BattleTech. BattleTech is a military sci-fi universe for people who aren't aware, based on the tabletop role-playing game that, as we're recording this, although we are very, very much at the end of the year, is celebrating its 40th anniversary. BattleTech, it has been around as a tabletop property for a very long time. If you haven't heard of BattleTech as a tabletop property, you might have heard of it as a video game as MechWarrior. It's been around for a while. My first encounter with it was on the Super Nintendo system, playing MechWarrior as a mercenary, traveling the inner sphere, taking on jobs, battling in a mech, and shooting people up. And it was a lot of great fun. Voidbreaker takes place in the year 3151, and it's a little bit different in that most BattleTech books are very much classic military sci-fi. They're very much this military unit goes to that military unit. Here's our political objective, and then we're going to have military battles, and that's sort of that. There's definitely character work that goes on, but this is very much a spy thriller.
Mhm.
This is in the mode of, I was very inspired by Mission Impossible and James Bond and those sorts of stories. And it's about a character in Clan Seafox who has been tasked with getting the interstellar communications network back up. And there's a scientist who's been in the universe for quite a while who might have the secret key to being able to do that. She's tasked with kidnapping him and convincing him to work for them to get this up and running. But unfortunately, everyone else is after him as well, and she has to find him and like I said, convince him to do the work, and hopefully the work actually happens and the science works out, because this the saboteurs behind destroying this network did a pretty good job of it, and it hasn't worked in some 20 or 30 years. So we'll see how that goes. And it's amazing because when BattleTech started, this network was up, and almost 30 years ago, when WizKids took over the license and they created the MechWarrior Clicks game, that's when they brought the network down and created the Dark Age in the universe. And this communications network hasn't been up since then. And so this is a pretty big watershed moment for longtime fans of the series to actually see if we get it back up again.
So I'm going to kind of touch on one thing you said about how long BattleTech's been around.
Yeah.
Until we had a flood in our house, I had the FASA, BattleTech, Aerotech, and CityTech.
Oh wow. So yeah, that goes back. Those box sets go back. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've had a few of the books going back forever. And when I started writing for BattleTech, I decided I was going to try to piece together a complete set of all the books. And the novels didn't take me very long. I'd already had a bunch of the novels to collect, but I've been trying to collect a lot of the source books, and I don't think I have the money to actually collect all the source books that I missed out on. I've got a pretty good collection, but man, those are some collector's items. If you're sitting on some of those are a bit of a gold mine.
I was going to say it's kind of along those lines if you're trying to collect everything from D&D.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, because I've been gaming so long, I have a pretty good collection of some, but it's like I don't have that many tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned that this one really takes a turn, and I heard you say that you had a lot of enjoyment in writing this. And when I was reading it and writing up my review, it was the same thing like you're saying. It's that espionage element, uh,
Yeah.
which just really hit me as really different from what seen in BattleTech. I take it that's what made this one so much more enjoyable was you had a little bit more looseness working with a watch instead of with the warriors.
Yeah, so the Watch, when you're dealing with clans, there's sort of two big warrior factions in each clan. Well, the Watch is a much sort of smaller faction, but it's basically their version of MI6 or the CIA. Um, and they uh they deal with the espionage sorts of elements of they deal with the espionage elements of day-to-day things, and being able to work with them was really fun. But also in preparation for this book, I knew I've read a lot of the Ian Fleming I'd read a lot of the Ian Fleming James Bond books before, and I'm a huge nerd for the movies, and I really loved the difference between the two. And I don't think people quite appreciate how vastly different they are. And when I pitched this novel, well, I didn't quite pitch it. We were at a story summit, and the line developer and I sort of took a gander at the map and said, "Here's a story I think we need to tell. We need to figure out an interesting way to get from here to here." And I was like, "This would be a perfect spy thriller." And I realized that it would be a great way to sort of bridge the gap between what people expect from James Bond movies and what makes Ian Fleming books really exciting to read. Because I don't think that people go back to the source material as much as maybe they should. And that was really fun with it. So as I was writing, it took me about a month to write the first draft of this, and as I was doing that, I was tearing through Ian Fleming books over again, just sort of like soaking in that flavor and watching like Mission Impossible movies and James Bond movies and stuff. Really trying to make sure I had that feeling, and I was enjoying that feeling. And so as I was writing it, I was trying to imbue the book with that. So it was just a whirlwind of espionage. Uh, and it was just fun. It was just really fun. And it was a joy to work on, even though there were some parts that were headaches. Um, I won't deny that. We cover a lot of ground as far as travel in the inner sphere, and that's always a big headache because of the way the science in BattleTech works, as far as how far you can travel and how long it takes and recharge times and things like that. So myself and Josh Perrion, who's an associate line developer with BattleTech, he and I were pretty much on line messaging each other every day, working out the math behind how quickly things could happen and what planets they could get to and when, and how the timeline needed to work out. And we had sort of like canon events at the beginning and at the end that we had to match up and make sure that the story was told between those two spots. Um, and we really didn't have much wiggle room, so we had to really make sure that it fit between those two things, and that was a little bit of a headache. But having a collaborator like Josh really helped that part of the process and made that fun as well. I really like collaborations. That's one of the things I love about filmmaking too, right? Like you've got a bunch of people around and you're working with them at their creative best as well. And usually writing a novel is a very lonely process. But being able to offload some of that hard work and say like, hey, how long would it take to get somewhere, and not having to do that hard thinky part myself, and have somebody who's really good at that and have them go, oh, but what if this happened? Or what if they went here instead? And have them bring their A game to it, made it all the more fun.
So it's almost like playing a game as you wrote it out.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit.
So we're talking here about BattleTech, but I know you've written in other intellectual properties or for or about other intellectual properties.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I mean, you've done stuff about Star Wars, The Big Bang Theory, Robotech, along with BattleTech, and those are the ones that just come immediately to my head. Um, for you, and for other people, I know they ask a question probably a lot is, what is it that draws you to write in somebody else's sandbox?
Um, it's fun. It really does. It's fun primarily, right? Like I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. It opens doors. So it opens doors to other work, right? Robotech was really, well, no, that's not true. Star Wars was the first intellectual property I was really doing other work with. Because I was working with Star Wars Insider and at StarWars.com, and that opened doors to other things. Um, and I was covering like comic books, doing stuff with like Marvel and DC as a journalist. Um, but Robotech was the first one I got to do like fiction in, and that opened doors. And I've been able to do stuff in Shadowrun now, and BattleTech, and I've been able to do licensed products in Star Wars and Doctor Who, and like you said, Big Bang Theory, and all kinds of other places. And it's just fun to get to play in those sandboxes. If you're not a really good collaborator, I don't think that would be a place where you'd enjoy, right? Like because there are a lot of people and a lot of different goals in mind. Um, when you're working for a tie-in, the goal of the tie-in is twofold. It's to tell a story that's meaningful to you, but also to help sell the product that the license holder is asking you to sell, right? So like with Voidbreaker, my primary goal was to tell an interesting story for myself, tied with tell the story the licensor, in this case Catalyst Game Labs, needed me to tell to advance their story so that they could sell more tabletop gaming products and advance that story so that readers are interested in what's going on with the world. And that means buying plastic miniatures to play on the tabletop and, be excited about what's coming next. And, um, if they don't feel like I'm doing that job, they're not going to keep asking me to come back. And players aren't going to be excited about what's coming, so you kind of have to be able to serve, two purposes there. And I enjoy that challenge. It's like putting together a really complicated puzzle. And that's something that excites me creatively. I'm of the belief that constraint breeds creativity, and that the more constrained you are, um the more creative you have to be in order to get yourself out of those corners that you paint yourself into. And that it's almost harder sometimes to, I mean, like I do a lot of original work and I write a lot of original stuff, and that's really fun. But sometimes it's a little bit more intimidating to not have someone say, no, you can't do that. No, stay away from this. No, rein this in. Or no, you can't have that character, or no, you can't use that thing, or that thing over there. Because when I come up with an idea and somebody says, no, you can't do it that way, all of a sudden my brain starts going into overdrive saying, well, how can I do it without using those tools? And then all of a sudden I have a more interesting idea, by thinking around the problem that they've given me. And I come up with something that I think ends up being better. So for me, that's half the fun is trying to, I don't want to say like outwit them, but like to be able to get the story and not have to compromise what I think makes it great by giving into their hurdles, but making them satisfied with the answers I'm able to creatively come up with. It's a really interesting, fun challenge for me.
I'm going to steal some of that information when I talk to other people because I do some writing for some game companies and people have asked me the same thing, why? And it's you, I think you just clarified it for me even better. Is it because of the constraints? I didn't think about it that way, but because of the constraints and limitations, you actually have to become a better creative writer.
Yeah, no, it's true. It really is.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. Now, this is, I'll admit to people, this is not the first book of yours I've reviewed, but it's the first time we've had you on. Uh,
Hmm.
so you have three other BattleTech books that came out before this. And
As novels, there's one
yeah, it's
collection as
novels.
well that sort of adds up to a novel.
Yeah, okay.
And I wrote a serial novel that is being collected that hasn't been collected yet.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was able to do the other ones. And this time, one of the things you did in this one is you changed clans.
Yeah.
So how was that to kind of maybe shift gear from, because I know in BattleTech, if people don't know, each clan kind of has their own culture, their own way of doing things. Uh, and so to change one is like going from one whole culture and writing in a completely different culture. How was that
Yeah.
for you to kind of make that shift?
It took a lot of different research, definitely. Not as much, though, to be honest. The Jade Falcons have been a cornerstone of the BattleTech universe since almost the beginning, right? The Jade Falcons have been a major player since the introduction of the clans with Mike Stackpole's Blood of Kerensky trilogy. They've had entire series of books and source books documenting them and their culture and their evolution over the last 100 years of in-universe history. And they've been the major villains over the last, uh, 30 of our years of fiction and over the last, 100 years of the universe. So I had to do a lot of research and I had to do a lot of book reading. Clan Sea Fox, on the other hand, while they are very interesting and very different, they've only had they've been around, they've been involved in things, but they've been more mere mentions, and they've had only a handful of books and stories written about them. So the research was a lot less. But that's not to say that um, that's not to say that they weren't well established. But the other thing is that after 100 years of being in the inner sphere, all of these clans have sort of built their own identities that are separate from each other. If you go back and look at the original writing of the clans when they first arrived in the inner sphere in 3051, back when Mike Stackpole was writing them originally in the 80s, they were all pretty much homogenous. They all just kind of wore a different color with a different animal patch, right? And then 100 years of exposure in the inner sphere, they all kind of split their culture. Sea Fox originally was more different than all of the others to start with, but so imagining them a little bit different culturally was a lot easier, and dealing with someone who has spent time undercover for so long made it a little bit more interesting as well. So our main character, that whose eyes we see most of this through, is named Kendra Rodriguez. Rodriguez is her blood name. That's a traditional Sea Fox blood name, and she spends most of her time undercover. And you can't be a classic clan person speaking like a clanner, acting like a clanner, if you're going to be working undercover. You can't do that. You'll be given away immediately. So she's already a little bit of an iconoclast among clanners as it is. Um, so it was interesting to have to get into the Seafox mindset, do the research for them, and then come up with somebody who's already on the fringes of that. Um, so it took a lot of thinking and a lot of doing and a lot of you know, it's the same muscles you'd work to come up with a science fiction story in in our universe or any universe, just to sort of do that extrapolation and say, okay, here's the status quo of this universe. Here's 100 years in the future. Here's what this culture's like. Here's what this person does. Here's their job in that culture. Here's where they are, what they do, how would they act. Here's their background, and then try to figure out what that is, and what their culture would be. And yeah, it was a big shift. People who read this and have read my Jade Falcon work, um, I think might be surprised because it is different. They're not hopefully they're not they don't resemble each other at all because they are very different.
I actually enjoyed the shift, just like you were saying. I, I know BattleTech is very militaristic, and and I know a lot of people love the description of the mechs and the description of the battles, and then we get into this espionage, and it was just a really just different switch. I was like, okay, it describes the battles and the mechs there, but you could tell there was a difference because of the viewpoint difference, and
Yeah, no,
it was
she's
really.
definitely someone who pays attention to the angles in a different way.
Hmm. And it was very well captured. So
Thank you.
Voidbreaker is coming out. It's right now on pre-order that people can get through Amazon, but its release date is January 24th
Hmm.
of 2025. So just about a month away from now
Yeah.
that we're putting this out so people know. Now, I know we've been working on something
Yeah.
along those lines for Voidbreaker, and I know you were checking your schedule, so I don't want to put this out there as a definite, but I do know we've been working through you with Catalyst Lab Games. And at SaltCon next year, which is the end of February, 1st of March, we do have the play people here in Salt Lake coming to SaltCon, and we're going to be running BattleTech.
Yeah, no, that'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to try to be there as much as I can, but there is a film festival that requires my presence for the film The Lost Boys that we made last February, uh, which I'm really proud of. It's I think it's a really cool film.
Yeah.
And I'm it's
Yeah,
the
neither one of
same.
us are biased about the film.
Yeah, no, not at all. Um, it's the same weekend as SaltCon, but it ends a day before SaltCon, so I'm hoping to fly back in time to make it for at least a day of SaltCon.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but
what I've got locked out for people if they want is we've got Brian locked in if he can be there Sunday morning uh, for a couple of hours after the vendor rooms are shut down, but we've got it set up so you can bring in, we'll have some of the books there hopefully, um, and be able to come and meet and get things signed. And it's not just that. I mean, at SaltCon last year, I was surprised to see somebody was running a game, an RPG game, and I was like, that's kind of neat because it was this one right here.
oh, nice.
And you can do something like this here.
Yeah.
So, yes, Brian and I have had some history together, just like we were saying, The Lost Boys, just so people know. So that's all out there. I was an associate producer on the film. So I'm glad to see that it's doing as well as it has in the festival, and I really hope it does well back in New York. But I am looking forward to the idea of hopefully getting you out so we can kind of share your talents within the gaming community, because I don't know if people realize what strength we have here locally of people that work in large, you know, intellectual property games. It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. Um, and like you're saying, you've now also written for Shadowrun,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and Robotech and BattleTech. I mean, those are three major game systems that if
Yeah,
people
yeah,
are
no,
familiar with.
and I'm just starting to work on another game as well that's going to be launching next year with Gallant Knight Games,
Oh,
actually. Um, Alan Barr, who runs that, is launching a living RPG in the mode of kind of like how Legends of the Five Rings did, but it's more sci-fi in the mode of like Destiny, but it's called uh, Horizon Trigger, and that's going to be launching next year. And he's pulled myself and some of the writers from Legend of the Five Rings, into to manage that story, and have players actually dictate the direction of some of that. So that'll be fun too. Um, and I've done a bunch of writing for him as well, and hopefully there's more game writing coming. But yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff coming out in a lot of source books, actually, in BattleTech and in Shadowrun, um, coming soon as well.
well,
And yeah,
so
I
now you
just
give me
love
another
it.
connection we have because I write for the Tiny D6 magazine, which Alan Barr puts out on a quarterly basis.
Nice, nice. Yeah,
So
no, Alan's great people.
yeah, I've had the opportunity of working here with him for many years now, so it's very good. So congratulations on all that. So let's kind of jump over a little bit. We've kind of been talking about this. Give you a chance to tell us about the Lost Boys, your film, because I know that is something that I got involved with because it was really something when I saw what it was about, felt very strong about, and I knew you felt strong about it. So can you
Yeah,
share
so
a little bit about that?
yeah, The Lost Boys, it's an 8 minute short film. It's very short and sweet. It sort of skirts the line between drama and a very touching ghost story. And it's about a young man sort of struggling with his own mental health after an extreme loss, and is struggling with whether or not he is going to hurt himself pretty significantly. And he goes and has a conversation at a graveyard that could alter the course of his life after this tragedy that he's experienced. And I don't want to. I always hate talking about it because it's almost like it's hard
It's
to want to give it away
it's
because
hard to.
it's
I always tell people it's really hard to review a short without telling you the whole story.
yeah, especially because it is so short, and it's um but we've had so many we've played it at I think something close to 20 festivals. We've won um 10 or 12 awards so far. Most of them have been either best short or best international short. We've won a few for best acting, both for Vale, who's sort of the lead, and for Kingston, who's the young kid in the short, who's also my son. And a couple for best writing and a couple for best editing. And it's it's just really great. It just played this last weekend in Los Angeles at the Santa Clarita Film Festival. Um, the next one is that festival in New York, the North Film Festival, which is in association with a film, the I want to say the National Film Association in Denmark, who does screenings in New York of American and foreign films. Um, and hopefully we'll do a lot more, but we've been doing festivals since um, we've been doing festivals for about 7 or 8 months, and hopefully we'll be wrapping that up by um, the middle of next year, and then we'll be able to unleash it and get it out there for folks to see. And we'll be working on the next step. But it was really great to be able to put together something that I feel like we were able to do right. Put together the short exactly the way it was imagined to be, not have to compromise on it at all, put together a group of professionals to collaborate on it, and make it the best it could be, and really tell a story that I think was important. We were able to partner for some of the money on the production with a nonprofit called Mental Healthy FIT that does stuff with like the intersection between film and mental health, both in um, using films to destigmatize mental health issues, but also teaching people with mental health issues to use film as a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
And to be able to tell a story that has someone coping with a mental health issue and use them to help raise their platform and to tell a story that has someone coping with that felt really important to me. Um, I don't know. It is really hard to talk about if you haven't seen the film.
Yeah.
If
No,
if folks want to, huh?
I was going to say, I know the reason why I got involved is very much along those lines. I knew it was about mental health issues and suicide. Uh,
Yeah,
and I don't, you don't need to share anything that maybe personally, but I have lost friends to
yeah,
suicide uh, back when I was in high school and college, and even almost recently, about the year before this film, I had a great nephew that attempted suicide because of issues. So it was one that really hit me hard, saying, no, this is a message that needs to get out. And it is one of those that I would tell anybody, if you have any issues along these lines for yourself or people you know, these are the type of things that can really be helpful.
yeah. No, it's definitely something that um I have dealt with a lot with folks that have or folks that were verging on it. And in fact, um, I don't feel like I'm talking at a turn uh, sharing this because we had a screening with Mental Healthy FIT and Vale shared this at the screening. But Vale, the lead actor, is one of my best friend's kid, and they were having sort of an episode like they'd been off their meds and they ended up staying at my house. They were, I've known that kid since they were a baby. And they've always been welcome at my house, and they're the best friend of my son who's about that same age. And so when they were in crisis, they ended up at my house. And, while I was writing the script, um, I had to drive them to the hospital at one point so that they didn't hurt themselves. And it was afterward, it was before that it all happened that I'd asked if they wanted to be in the short film. And after they'd gotten out, they were like, yes, absolutely, I need to do this. So it was like, not only is it something that was important in general through a whole bunch of stuff in my life, it was like acutely important to myself and people who were in it as we were like working on it. And it's so great to see Vale doing really well, and it was so great to see him be able to like channel that into something positive and into art, uh, in the film.
Okay. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. And we've been talking about the past, what you've done. So
Hmm.
let's kind of look forward. What projects are you working on now that people, you mentioned you got a comic book coming out, you've got some
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
coming out for different What other projects can people be looking forward to from Bryan Young?
So, like I said, I've got the graphic novel coming out at some point. Like I said, we just turned in the script for BattleTech. I've got I'm doing two columns in the new Shadowrun magazine that's starting up next year. So there's you can look for that. Um, I'm hoping to do a lot more Shadowrun work, so you can look for me in Shadowrun stuff. I've actually turned in uh three BattleTech novels in addition, so you're gonna see a lot of me in BattleTech. Um, and I'm working on scripts for another short film and another feature, so I'm hoping to do more stuff there. And one of the things we didn't really touch on it, but I just had two sets of Star Wars trading cards come out that I
Oh
wrote,
yeah.
and I'm working on another one right now. So there's at least a couple of sets that'll come out next year that I've worked on. So um, just lots of stuff. And I've got a bunch of short stories coming out next year. So it's just as fast as I can write, stuff is coming out. And if anybody's interested, I do run a Patreon where it's a monthly membership for as little as $1, but I put out a brand new short story every month on it. So there's always something going on there.
So while we got you mentioned in Patreon, where can they find you online? What would be your Patreon handle, and where else can they find you and
So
more
they can
information?
find me everywhere at Swankmotron. So it's swankmotron.com or it's patreon.com/swankmotron or across social media at Swankmotron. Um, and or you can just Google Bryan Young author and you'll come up with any of that. If you Google Bryan Young Patreon Swankmatron, you'll get just about just me. Um,
And I know you keep
yeah,
a really busy schedule being out in front of the public.
yeah,
I mean, you've
I've
been
got a
to
lot of
major
conventions this
conventions and
year. Yeah. My next convention is, I believe, LTUE, which is Life, the Universe, Everything in Provo in February. And then after that, I've got Indiana Comic Convention in Indianapolis. And then I've got, well, no, and then I've got SaltCon actually, and then Indiana, and then I think I'll be at Adepticon. Um, and there's a whole bunch after that. So I'll definitely be at Gen Con and Dragon Con this year. I'm going to Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo, so it's I'll be all over the world this year. So
sounds like a lot of fun. So, I mean,
yeah.
you've had the opportunity that many people just say, that's what they've always wanted to do. But for you, with everything you've done, what would you say is your dream project you'd like to work on?
Um, I mean, like my dream project is I want to direct a Star Wars movie, but somehow I think that that's a little bit too far out of reach. Something that I think I can actually obtain. Like I would really love to write a Star Wars novel or a comic, or something. I just want to tell Star Wars story. I get to work on Star Wars, but like there's something about getting to tell a story that's really like important. Um, and getting a novel would be great. So there's that. Um, but getting to direct a feature film, uh, it almost doesn't even matter what. I just really want to direct a feature film.
Maybe a
Um,
BattleTech?
BattleTech would be great. A BattleTech movie is never going to happen though. And that's Michael Eisner's fault. Um, it seriously is. Like Michael Eisner owns some of the rights and Tops owns some of the rights and or not Tops, Microsoft owns some of the rights. And so it's like the license is so split up because of how FASA went bankrupt in the 80s that
Yeah.
it's just never going to happen. Um, Not that I don't want it to. But no, just directing a feature film from a script I wrote would be a dream project. I really love the medium of film. I love the challenge of telling stories that way, and it would be a dream to be able to have the money to tell an effective story without having to worry about money. Because that's always the biggest thing, right? Like every time you're like, oh, I don't have money for that, it's a compromise. And it's shocking to me that people will be able to be in situations where it's like they don't have to compromise. I would like that. And someone produces that and just snaps their fingers and makes it happen. It doesn't matter that it costs money. I just read something like Andor season 1 and 2 total, which is 24 episodes of television, which is, I mean, 24 hours of content is going to end up costing something like $600 million. And personally, I would throw $600 million at anything Tony Gilroy wants to do if I had that sort of money, but he doesn't have to worry about anything. If he says this is how I want to do something, someone's going to throw that money at him. Um, but you know what I mean? Just to be able to be at that level and say and have money not be an object would be great. That's my dream.
Okay.
For money to not be an object.
So I'm going to ask a question now that I ask everybody when I interview them. And I know you've been asked this question because I know you've been in leadership positions for writing organizations, your involvement with film and all these other things. If you had someone come to you and say, "Hey, I want to get involved as a writer, become a writer, or become a filmmaker, or get involved in all these things," what advice would you give them?
Just do it. Um, just keep doing it. Don't quit. This goes back to actually um, wind the clock back to 2002. I'm at Star Wars Celebration 2 in Indianapolis. I'm in the Indianapolis Convention Center, and I'm a young filmmaker. I'm working on all kinds of films here locally. I just wrapped my first assistant or my no, I was the second AD on a local film called Handcart. We just finished our spring shoot or May. Yeah, we just finished our spring shoot. And I spent every dime I made on that movie flying to Indianapolis to go to Star Wars Celebration. I wanted to make movies so bad. We were making short films and we were shooting all the time. I owned, I was running a comic book store at the time and I was managing a movie theater as well. And I spent every waking moment aside from that writing. And I was literally 2 weeks away from having my first child. And in the hallway, indoors, in the days of the Indoor Clean Air Act, I just see this puff of smoke and smell cigarettes. And of course, it's Rick McCallum, the producer of the Star Wars prequels. And my friend and I went and introduced ourselves to him, and I couldn't help but pull him aside and shake his hand. And I've got pictures of this, and say, "Sir, you're an inspiration. Like, I really just want to make movies." And I was wearing a Panavision t-shirt, right? Like that's the sort of nerd I was. Um, you know, I I just want to make movies. And what advice do you have for a young filmmaker who just wants to do stuff? And he said, just keep shooting. Don't let anybody stop you. Just keep shooting, and you're going to be able to. Like if you want to make movies, just keep shooting and don't let anybody stop you. And fast forward a couple years ago, and I was able to interview him for Star Wars Insider, and I was able to tell him this story, and he's like, "Have you kept shooting?" And I was like, I haven't. It got really hard because the economy went belly up, and I ended up taking a job where I was sort of shooting. I was doing stuff adjacent to film where I was filming, but not like narrative stuff. And I started writing novels. And he's like, well, you need to get back to it. And that was actually the kick in the pants I needed to start making Lost Boys. Um, and I realized that it wasn't just a filmmaker I wanted to be. I had to expand that to storyteller. Um, and so I realized that I needed to encompass film and in order to not necessarily feel like a failure to myself, um, that I need to make films and comic books and shorts and novels and all of those things, that I needed to be a storyteller. And it was talking to him again to remind myself that, like, I didn't screw up. I just learned how to be a different sort of storyteller and have come back to it. And I'm going to keep doing all of it. I'm just going to keep shooting, and I'm just going to keep writing, and I'm just going to keep telling stories. And that's all I do. That's all I'm going to do now for the rest of my life. All I'm going to do is just tell stories. And that's the advice I would give to anybody who wants to do it. You just need to do it. I spent so many years doing it on top of having a family and on top of having a full-time job and on top of having sometimes two full-time jobs. And I just kept doing it. Back in 2011, I started challenging myself with writing a short story every month. I've written a short story every month since 2011, and I haven't missed one, right? When you write that many short stories, you're going to get better as a writer. You're going to get faster, right? I challenged myself. I'll look at my thing. Um, 3,458 days ago to start writing every day and not miss. And 3,458 days ago, I haven't missed a day in writing, and that's been through stays in the hospital and sicknesses and vacations and everything. And, 15 years of a full-time job. Well, I mean, that's only almost 10 years of that full-time job, but um, you just keep doing it. You just keep doing it, even if it feels like it's worthless, even if you feel like that little voice of doubt in your head tells you to stop. You just got to keep doing it. There's an adage that says every overnight success is 10 years of work. And for me, it was more like 20, right? So like just keep doing it, because if you quit, you're the only one who said no to you.
Yeah. That reminds me of a couple things I've always heard. The overnight success is usually a 10-year program.
Yeah.
And we have a common friend who's been on here with me before, and we both know Johnny Worthen. He
Yeah.
actually introduces himself and goes, I'm in the 12th year of my 10-year plan to be an overnight success.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I started trying to be a storyteller professionally right out of high school. And that was in 2000. Well, I graduated high school in 98. I started my first movie started in film festivals in 2001, and I didn't start actually getting paid to write anything until um 2005. And that was in fits and starts, and I still had to support myself with other stuff, and I didn't become a full-time writer doing nothing but writing. I had a brief window from 2005 to 2007 where I was able to do that, uh, where I was a full time like freelancer. And then the economy went belly up in 2008. And then I had full time jobs again all the way up until um, 2022. February 2022 is when I was finally able to go, okay, I'm going to be a full time writer and actually support myself doing that. Um, so, and that was doing it full time on top of a full time job.
Yep. It's it's one of those things. Being a creative talent is one of the few places you can usually ask people without being rude. You can ask people, so what do you do for your day job? Uh,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
understand it's a lot of work. So
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being with us. We've been talking for just over a half hour. So I know we're moving into the holidays. For people who don't know, we're on Christmas Eve here, and we'll be getting this out shortly. But I want to remind everybody, I've had the opportunity of taking classes from Bryan. I've had the opportunity of working with him on some other projects, like we said, the film, and both of our involvement in the League of Utah Writers and at LTUE and at FanX and some different things like that. If you get the opportunity to learn from this gentleman, take it. Uh, if you just listen to his story here, you can tell Bryan is someone who has made a successful journey as a creative talent. And he can help. I think you have helped a number of other people to do that same thing. You've given me motivation over the years that I've known you to kind of take some of those next steps and challenges. And that's part of the reason why I stepped up to be an associate producer with you, just knowing who you are. So again, reach out, find him. Like we're saying, he's got film festivals coming up, a number of different writing conventions, gaming conventions, fan conventions, pretty much all over. I used to say the United States, now I can say all over the world. Uh, so thank you again. So as we go, Swank Motron uh,
Hmm.
is where they can find you. And any final words that you would like to just throw out there? It's like I tell people that when I'm interviewing the directors and that, here's your chance to give your Oscar speech.
If it's in that vein, I just want to thank the specifically the fans of BattleTech who keep coming back. Not only the fans that have been there from the beginning, but all the new fans who keep coming back to it and who are really gracious at bringing people into the game, but also bringing people into the fiction and keep recommending my fiction as an entry point. I'm a big believer in that any book in BattleTech is likely going to be someone's first, and I've been hopefully trying to make it easy for that any so that any of my books can be that first introduction into BattleTech and people aren't going to be too lost. And I feel like it's been pretty successful, and I want to thank everybody who's recommended one of my books for that purpose. And just people for keeping not just that game alive, but gaming in general. It's one of the great experiences that we can do as humans, to sit around at a table, to pretend that the rules of reality are different, and get a different sense of agency out of each other, and to be able to attack each other in a way that is socially acceptable.
It's like I tell people in my role-playing game groups and that I've for years, it's like gaming is one of the few places that you can kill someone and not be in trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
So I totally accept that. Hey, thank you again, everyone. And thank you, Bryan, for joining us. If you like what we're doing here, please like this, share it out to people that you think might enjoy hearing from Bryan. Uh, and if you subscribe to the channel here, I'd appreciate it. It helps us do more of this. We're growing and we're being able to reach out and get a broader community and broader base of people we get to talk to. So until next time, see you soon.